On this slide are the 5 schools of the 22 schools in our cohort that the Charter Schools Office is recommending for a 5-year renewal without school-specific conditions. These are the 5 schools that across the domains have provided us evidence through outcomes, through document review, through site observations, and through focus groups that they are either meeting or approaching the standard across all 3 of our domains. It's notable here that although in the case of Mastery Cleveland and West Oak Lane Charter School, they are rated as approaches in the organizational compliance category, the cut point for meeting the standard is actually 80%. So they are both sitting at 79%, very close to meeting the standard there. One other point to note here is that there's been an active conversation about some of the challenges that our standalone charter schools experience. I think it's notable that 4 out of the 5 schools in this first bucket are in fact standalone charter schools that have invested in their schools, have designed systems and implemented those systems in a way that has led them to this group here today. And last note that will lead us into the next slide is that Keystone Academy Charter School is the sole school in this cohort that has met the standard across all 3 domains. In fact, it's the first school that has met all 3 domains since 2016. As part of their renewal application, they've requested an enrollment increase of 300 students, which we'll be discussing on the next slide. And so, as I just mentioned, Keystone has requested the increase from their currently authorized enrollment of 700 students to 1,000 students. The request will ramp up this enrollment starting next year with an additional 190 students and results in 1,000 students by year 4 of their proposed charter term. The Charter Schools Office, given the evaluation that we conducted over the course of this renewal period, is recommending that the Board of Education approve the additional 300 seats to the enrollment as part of the Charter Schools renewal. And we'll pause here if there's any questions.
Do any board members have questions? Board member Hinton.
Okay. Oh, I'm looking at you over there. Okay. So does Keystone Academy Charter School need to acquire a new building or location to accommodate the requested enrollment?
No, they do not. They actually have a fairly new building that's been constructed for them within the last, I think it's 5 years. They actually are also building currently in addition to their existing facility. That's not contingent upon the 300 seats, but will certainly allow them to serve an additional 300 students.
Board member Streeter.
So I am really encouraged, surprised by all the green. We don't usually see that, but I am curious, is that indicative of all the subgroups of students, right? Or do we have certain populations of students that are carrying that, in particular, the academic success?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is often the case because we do report out at the school level that sometimes disparate outcomes at the subgroup level, or achievement gaps as sometimes they're referred to, are masked. It's important to note that with Keystone, their 3 largest demographics of Latinx students, Black students, and white students perform comparably in the PSSA results that we do have. And so that is a good sign, and unfortunately not typically seen in some of our high performing schools. So that is good that those achievement gaps do not necessarily exist. I do want to also add that for students with IEPs at Keystone, they are also outperforming similar schools in the district as well in that category.
Yeah, I think that's a really important metric that we need to pay more attention to, because you can have schools that, you know, overall will do well, and you have students that are struggling. And we perhaps need to take another look at our framework so that we capture that information and make sure that all student groups are being served by the school, not just a few. So appreciate that, and excited to hear about that. Board member Reginald Streeter.
I have more of a comment. As a board, we have been focused on prioritizing student outcomes and ensuring that all students have access to educational opportunities that allow them to strive, succeed, and lead in a global society. I believe this is the gravamen or the intent or the thing that drives the board to make decisions as it relates to charter schools and our public schools. So I will say that I, as a board member, as an individual board member, I'm in favor of supporting the charter schools office's recommendation to increase seats at Keystone Academy Charter School because they have demonstrated their ability to provide a high quality education to students, even as we look at subgroup performance across student groups.
Board Member Sally?
Yeah, thank you for this report. This is actually really helpful and really good to see the progress. In the spirit of process improvement and an infinite ability to always improve, you mentioned that several of the schools in the organizational category are really, really close to getting into the green. Wondering, have you shared with the staff specific discussions or best practices from some of the other school, or has the charter school office just served as a resource for sharing best practices? So as they make plans that can move them towards the green, they've had the benefits of some other local best practices.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We certainly see the charter schools office, we see ourselves as a resource for all 85 charter schools in the city, in that while we do very much respect their autonomy, we do have an annual evaluation process that provides ongoing feedback to schools, such that if there are areas that a school is being deemed as not compliant or could be improving, that we do have resources that essentially a resource library that schools can tap into if they want to reach out to us and access those materials. We do also have ongoing conversations across the sector to make sure that we're sharing what we can share while respecting the autonomy that schools have to design their own programming.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Danzy?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's this, but on Keystone, and I heard Dr. Board Member Streeter. Are there any stipulations or requirements for them being able to have this, that extra enrollment?
Yeah, we understand that growth, while generally helpful for schools, especially from a revenue perspective, it does ultimately offer operational challenges as the school continues to enroll students. And so we are intending on building into their proposed renewal charter conditions that track the growth of the enrollment against continued and sustained performance.
Have adequate space in their facility to accommodate that growth?
Yes, their existing and expanding footprint will allow them to educate the additional 300 students.
Board Member Fix Lopez?
Yeah, a quick follow-up to that. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the school that has a really long wait list. Is that right?
Yeah, my understanding of their waiting list is that it's in the range of 3,000 to 4,000 students.
And they're not a Renaissance, so they're not a regular catchment. So are they pulling from across the city, or would enrollment increase really impact a neighborhood school?
So it does tend to be the case naturally that charter schools, even if they're citywide like Keystone is, do tend to pull from more proximal neighborhoods just because it makes sense that families want a school that's closer to where they live. So that is true in the case of Keystone and every other citywide charter school. But it is also the case that Keystone is fairly diverse, especially as you compare to the district averages. So we don't necessarily have any concerns from a demographic or IEP or English learner distribution.
Are there any other board member questions? Ms. Hauger, are there any hands up? Ms. Thompson? Oh, I see. Okay, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. First off, you've done an awesome job, Pong, with this very difficult work. And I know you've been asked to share this across the state. So my question is this something that the board could consider as a model to evaluate our public schools that are not charters? Thank you.
I certainly think there are some practices that the charter schools office employs through our evaluation process that either could be used by the district or already being used by the district. So wherever possible, we try to align our evaluations because we do think that comparison between charter schools and traditional district schools is important. So we're in constant communication with colleagues on the district side to make sure that, if possible, our evaluations are overlapping. There are inherently some things that we look at with charter schools that are different because they are in some respects their own independent school districts with their own independent operations. I think those are some of the challenges when you think about school to school comparisons.
I think it probably would be worthwhile to have a conversation about, where the conversations that happen. So Dr. Height frequently will say, well, he's in conversations with, a charter school provider over, what it is they're doing for family engagement. Or I know Chief Bethel is somebody who provides services to schools regardless of whether it's a district school or a charter school. So there's much more mutual support and conversation than we tend to assume. So it might be helpful to have a presentation that reflects the kind of when you have some of these shootings involve charter schools and kids in charter schools, and we deploy our people to those schools regardless of the fact that they're charter schools and not traditional schools.
Absolutely. Next slide, please.